Welcome to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. Joan and Janet are subtle energy empaths who navigate consciousness. Their passion is to support you in your evolution. As consciousness, we are all one. One mind, one heart, free of all limitations. Experience this reality with us and discover how it can make a difference in your daily living. Join us in a state of grace as we explore, with warmth and humor, this thing we call life. Now, here are Joan Newcomb and Janet Barrett.
Welcome to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. We're your co-hosts, Joan Newcomb, coming to you from Tacoma, and partner Janet Barrett's coming to you from Portland, Oregon.
Hello, everyone. How nice to be with you again.
It is a lovely day in the neighborhood. And we have a lovely topic. We are going to be talking about power as consciousness.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of a shifting. We are in the middle of shifting our own, the shift is hitting the fan, our old paradigm concepts of power and force in all areas of life, in politics and religion and finance and our gender, all sorts of things. So stay tuned, because we're going to be focusing on new ways to be free of the labels of the past and embrace being empowered.
And this is something it's so vital and important and in our faces right now, everyone. So if you'd like to call in, you can reach us at 1-844-390-8255. That's 1-844-390-8255. And give us what you're noticing, and we'll have a conversation about it, I'm sure. And what do we want people to know about outside of the show, Joan? How to reach us.
How to reach us outside of the show. So the other thing is, if you call in, besides giving us what you're noticing, you could also ask us questions. If you don't understand what we're talking about, feel free to join us in the conversation. Or if you get a brand new idea, that's what Janet means by what are you noticing.
Yeah.
And how to go deeper with us outside of the show is go to our website, consciousconversationswithjoanandjanet.com. You can listen to all our old archived shows on the podcast, all our old podcasts there. You can listen to our podcast 24/7. You can also listen to our YouTube videos. I have a whole ton of YouTube videos. I put them out every week on mystical things. And you can also get our old YouTube shows on YouTube. You can go to our websites. Janet and my websites are listed there. You can read our blogs. We put out really interesting and fascinating blogs on different things. And Janet puts hers out on Mondays, brand new stuff to read for the week. And mine's on Fridays, so brand new stuff to read for the weekend. You can find out about our meetups. Janet does hers on Tuesdays and Thursdays in Portland in the comfort of her lovely home. And it is I want to say both magnificent, magnetic, and transformative experience. If you go to her house, it'll knock you on your butt, but you will be laughing all the way down. And then my meetups are around the Puget Sound, primarily in Seattle, Tacoma, Bellevue, and University Place. And did I say Tacoma? Seattle? Yeah. In those places. And they're listed on the website there as well. While I'm at it, I'll just let you know that I am on Vashon Island on Saturday. I'm doing a special talk there. 2017 is the year of realization. What are you going to manifest? So I'm going to be at the King County Library on Vashon Island talking about that this Saturday, the 11th. And I'm going to be doing my good old Conscious Conversation meetup on Magnolia Library in Seattle on the 12th. So on Sunday afternoon, come on down and join our Conscious Conversation. It is similar and different to what Janet does, just like Janet and I are similar but different.
Definitely.
And we also, let me see, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, Facebook, Joan Newcomb and Janet Barrett. You can find us there. And the show is Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. So join the group and join the fun. You can follow us on Twitter at Joan and Janet on Twitter. And I am Joan M. Newcomb on Twitter if you want to see all my inflammatory tweets and also pictures of corgis to calm things down in between. So that's Twitter. And we have a fun thing coming up. Do you want to tell them about it, or should I, about our Conscious conversation?
Well, I think it's a new process, so maybe you're more up on the technical. So our conscious conversations, conference calls we're going to do are going to be over Zoom now, I think is what you said.
Yeah, so what we've been doing is a monthly free teleseminar for folks, and we're getting a little more hip as we get further into this century. So we're going to be doing it on Zoom, and you will have the option of doing a video call with us or doing a phoning in to Zoom as well. So either way, you can join us. It gives a more multidimensional aspect to doing our conscious conference calls. And we do them every third Thursday of the month. So that is on the 16th of February at 7 p.m. Pacific. So go to our website and you'll be able to sign up for that.
And if you would like to talk to us right here and now, our number is 1-844-390-8255. And let's get into our topic. Because,
yes.
Boy, we got stuff. I think our conversation about all this was we're noticing the political strife going on and realizing what's going on in consciousness and what is unfolding and what is evolving. And you and I have been talking about how to reframe out of this, the old paradigms that we're noticing that really aren't serving as we evolve as individuals. And so, listeners, we're here to kind of re-encode and open up to the possibility that if there was a different way to be, because everyone has an honest viewpoint, what would that look like? How would that be? And how do we, in what we're doing here each week, offer potential in what is possible? Right? Isn't that kind of about it, Joan?
Yes. Yes, something you said in that very first sentence you said, I went off on a tangent and I came back to you saying, isn't that right? I was like, yes. So now I'm feeling embarrassed because I'll probably echo what you say, but I do that all the time anyway. We tend to say the same thing using different language, and that's the advantage of our show is that we can appeal to a broader audience because you and I are bringing the same message. We have really different ways of talking about it and of expressing it in the world, which shows people that they can do this differently as well. We are all consciousness. We all have a unique expression in the world. So if I'm backpedaling here, we're talking about power as consciousness, and the way I see it is that, we have these old paradigm expressions of power, and we used the word force, that power is something that's dominating and is imposing upon other people. And the shift that is happening is that we're all becoming empowered. We are all waking up and experiencing this greater aspect of who we are as consciousness. We're feeling it within. And as that is happening, we're all feeling more empowered. For some of us, we're feeling more rebellious because we're rebelling against all the things that we felt were disempowering us. And we're also, it's an interesting thing because we're individually becoming more empowered and we're reaching out and experiencing the power of the collective. So there you see this uprising around the planet of people gathering together as groups and experiencing the collective power as well of the individual. So it's really exciting.
Well, it is, and it's demonstrating the evolutionary shift, and one hates to fall into the trap of labels, because that's what really the show is all about. It's about how our labels and thinking in those terms, in those limits, does limit us to really looking at things from an energetic place.
Oh, right.
So
that's what we talked about. Yeah.
So what I'm noticing is that the energy is shifting from a power force conversation to a connective conversation, and that we are connecting with one another, because as consciousness, we're all one. We're individuals in this shared experience. And it's in consciousness, when it's the infinite sea of potential, which we'll get into here in a few minutes, where you and I are one. And so that's our reality. So how do we reflect that in our internal conversations is shifting to a place of connection. And some people are going to ascribe that to more of a feminine influence. Some people are going to have the challenge of thinking power force in a masculine resonance. And this is what we're learning to navigate. And as we see in our political arena out there, these demonstrations of people doing things and everyone else has got to put up with it. And then the repercussions, the reaction that's happening of people saying no and showing up more is this wonderful exchange of where the sense of empowerment is. Who has it? Free of boundaries, free of gender, free of whatever those words are that we've been using. So this is being outside of that hologram that you love to share with us all the time, Joan, is how to be free of new framing. This is the new framing.
Yes, and what I remembered that I wanted to tell folks is that he's shifting out of the story of it because, if you get into the story of like what's happening around the world or what's happening in politics or what's happening in gender or any of those things, you can get enmeshed in the story instead of just releasing the pattern and shifting to a new experience. Yeah. So in terms of releasing the pattern, you're going to be taking us into a very powerful state. However, we're going to stop for a commercial break right now, so stay tuned because you're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet, and we will be talking about power as consciousness in a state of grace when we come right back.
Would you like a fresh approach to the challenges you are dealing with? Take a journey into your enlightenment with Janet Barrett. Janet is a subtle energies empath, accessing the field of potential with warmth, humor, and support. She will help you to hear what your inner voice is saying. She will share with you how to appreciate who you are now and offer you new ways to understand and transform your issues. Reach her at www.janetandbeyond.com. That's janetandbeyond.com. Again, janetandbeyond.com. Transformation is possible. You can enjoy new outcomes in your current experiences. They can happen in the blink of an eye. Is your soul calling you to do something more meaningful with your life? Do you feel crazy for wanting to quit your secure job? Perhaps you are waiting until you retire to do what you love. Maybe you are too daunted to follow your dream. If any of these match your life, then Joan Newcomb's Purpose and Passion Coaching Program is just for you. In just 12 weeks, you will discover who you essentially are and why you are here. Learn to live as your greater self and navigate with conscious mastery. Go to joan-newcomb.com. That's joan-newcomb.com for all of her coaching programs.
Welcome back. You're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. I'm your host, Joan. I'm along here with Janet, and we are talking about power as consciousness.
Yeah, it is powerful to be conscious. I think that's probably the ultimate, right? I think that's what we're looking for. So, well, how about we get into heart, Joan, and just see where this leads us? Because this has been so in our faces. You and I have had a lot of conversation this last week about all this energy and dynamic that's at play, and it's so exciting. And I know some people are going to say, there's nothing exciting about all this, but it is, people. It really is. So, let's see here. Take a breath, and whatever time and space you're in, just allow that to be, and just, there we go. Yeah, there's so much dynamism. Is that the word, dynamism, going on?
Dynamism, like dynamic.
Yeah. There we go. Thank you. So just breathe and just notice your heart. Your most wonderful, glorious heart. There you go. Be grateful and thankful and appreciative and all those wonderful things that it does beat for you. It is telling you that you are connected. And just notice. And then that second meaning of heart, the emotional terrain, which is what's so fired up in people. So let's just go neutral. Take a step back. And you might need to take another step back. There we go. Oh, and another step back. There we go. Everybody was faced on the glass. Okay. So just allow yourself to just step back. There you go. And just notice the emotions that are running. Hot, cold, whatever they might be. And be grateful because that is the flavoring in the soup of life for you. Okay. And we're just all becoming master chefs. The senses. You know, to be a chef, you gotta have good senses, good inhalation, and good taste. It's all part of the whole. So as we're taking this time to evolve and unfold within each of ourselves, clearing out the old stuff, life will taste better. Life will smell better as you get rid of the old. That's interesting. So now, third meaning of heart, the core essence of all. And this is where you and I lose individuality and we all are one. Into the infinity of potential before something became something. So just notice where everything kind of just gets a little softer. So it's just all photons of light, some biophotons, a little bit of mass, and there are those frequencies and vibrations and resonances and information that all fall into patterns. Patterns of influence, patterns of behavior. It's all patterns that make up who you are. And just notice that because those are subject to change. Those are determined by your biases and your perceptual settings that you as consciousness, as you embody, chose to be who you are in this lifetime. So just notice, what if those were a little softer, had a little more give to them, and everything wasn't so hard? There was ease. And ultimately what there is flow. So experience the flow. There you go. Well, that's feeling nicer. Everyone, allow yourself the flow. There it is. We're so caught up in the titles and in the actions and in the labels. And this is where you can stop and reframe. Find the individuality in the collective. We are all vital and important in the collective. We are the collective. There's a little bit of breathlessness about that. So just notice that. What if you could relax? There we go. What if you understood how vital you were to the rest of us? We're seeing very clearly how individuals can affect the whole. And you are no different or less powerful than them. Because it's about all of us. There is no them. All right, Miss Joan, what you noticing there?
I'm noticing a lot more agitation than I normally notice when you bring us to this state. Mm-hmm. So I am aware of a lot more going on, and almost like a collective tipping point that's about to happen. And it occurs to me that, there's this planet is a playground, it's a game, and one of the games to play is creating and destroying. And actually creating and destroying naturally happens all the time.
Right.
It's, you see it in nature, a tree falls down and then if it's left alone in the forest, it starts sprouting smaller trees. So there's a natural ebb and flow to everything. And what I'm aware of is that there's a harsher feel to what is going on as greater power, as consciousness is coming into form, which is really, it's like the power of the sun. It's like it's feeling warmth, it's feeling expansive. It's greater, that kind of subtle but profound power is coming into form. The other kind of power is disintegrating, and it's not going out with a whimper. So people are feeling the destructiveness of that old paradigm as it is disintegrating. It's, so the stories of it are like, it's going out kicking and screaming, it's taking prisoners, it's whatever it's doing on the way out. And really what it is that we're letting go of that old paradigm, that old form of power. And there's a lot of agitation, discomfort as it's happening.
I think what comes into awareness is about judgment. Things happen, and like you describe, you can describe an action two ways. Oh, it's a good thing. Oh, it's a bad thing. Both of those are judgments. If you just allow it to be and appreciate that it seems that we've set things up that for every action there's a reaction. We've got one of those morphic fields going. But if you look at nature or the cosmic forces around us, there's no judgment in any of that except our viewing of it, our experience, our interpretation of it. But planets come, planets go. Stars show up, stars disappear. Forces are at play always around us, and we human make a judgment whether that's good, bad, ugly, indifferent. And that's what's freeing up here and is feeling chaotic, is because all that submerged energies are having an outlet. They're rising up. It's an unfolding, which is interesting because I find myself using both words, unfolding and rising up, as this experience, this expression of expansion happens. Maybe some people don't know what to do with that, right? They don't spend the time like you and I do, and those of us who do this as a way of experiencing life.
Yeah, it's happening to everyone. We're all individually experiencing it. And I would say many people, if not most people, do not have language to describe it. I was talking to a woman yesterday, and she'd been to one of my meetups on the weekend, and she said, I'm just having vertigo today, And I said, well, does it feel pleasant? Because my experience when people do the consciousness work and they play the consciousness games that you and I provide for them at our meetups, it's a pleasant floatiness. It's a buoyancy. And she was like, oh, she had been thinking it was a medical thing. So, so that's kind of what you're talking about, is if you take the good and bad judgment about it, like, oh, well, it's better to be this way, or it's not that good to be this way. And also language doesn't really describe, because consciousness comes from outside the matrix, outside the box, outside the hologram. And there isn't really a direction to it. So you can experience it coming at you. You can feel it coming up within you. And everyone, as I said, is experiencing it differently. So if you're listening to this, you're probably experiencing it, because otherwise you wouldn't be interested in this show.
That's true. And, it's okay where we find ourselves. I think that's the important part. But it's, for me, in how I've set up my world, it is, I expect, I've got my intentions and expectations, lining them up as best I can, that something wonderful is always happening. Now, I put the wonderful on it, not as a judgment, but as that whether it feels good or bad, it's wonderful. Because it's something that is encouraging me to question, encouraging me to be curious, encouraging me to look in new ways. So it's how you use your language and how you use your states of awareness and what you do with them. Because you and I both know a lot of people in their framing of how they experience their realities, they're not always in a positive place. They're not always in a neutral place. That's where we really want to be, is in that neutral place. And that's why the reframing is really important.
Yes. And I was about to say something else. I'm having a senior moment. It was really profound.
We can call that a brain
Oh,
flop,
well,
but
so actually, I think what I was going to relate to is, releasing outside of the, outside of your story.
Oh,
and
right, yeah.
That's why I find it really helpful for people to sometimes release symbolically. Mm-hmm. So instead of seeing the exact memory when they were 3 years old and having to, go into that memory to change it or process that memory or spend the next 17 years in therapy about that memory, maybe it's just seeing glass shatter. Maybe it's just seeing bubbles dissipate. Maybe it is a geometric shape that collapses and reforms into something else. Mm-hmm. I had a woman come to one of my meetups a couple of weeks ago now who was autistic. And she was 70 years old. She was autistic, and she also had a brain injury. And I loved her. She was experiencing energy transform, and she saw it in geometric shapes. And I was like, that is how I'm seeing it. When I go on my walks and I do my little energy things, it's geometric shapes now, or even circular things moving in and out. And it's hard to describe, but I know that what is happening is energy is shifting, and you're releasing those patterns, and you're collapsing those patterns of whatever the story is in those patterns, and expanding to a newer experience. So it's helpful not to have the story on it. It's helpful not to get bogged down or have the expectation. And the thing that's also helpful is to just notice what changes, whether it's a feeling change, it's a visual change, or you go home and, you've just won the lottery. I don't know, your storyline change.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think we want to make clear for people that when we use the term story, because, for myself, I always consider myself a storyteller. Right? That's our old tradition. So our story is our myth. It's it can be a clan, it can be a family, it can be, everything falls into these patterns, and there becomes a storyline that you are who you are because this happened before, and then this happened, and then it began here, and then it changed here. And it develops a storyline when we all have our stories. And many times we have stories that conflict with each other, and we carry on our genetic stories. And what we're suggesting is that it's just a story. It's just a myth. It's just a way that you've allowed it to be the guiding motivator in who you are. And you are no longer who you are who your story has made you to be. And that in this, as consciousness is evolving, we're tapping into our own sense of empowerment to realize that we are part of this story and that the story can change. The challenge being when you have a storyline you're following that says there's no way to be different, that this must be the story. And that's the way a lot of people live. This is who I was, this is who I will be, and that's who you die as.
Right.
And
it's our life story. It's our narration is what you're talking about.
Right.
And one way of changing your life is to change your story. You work with people on reframing their story. Mm-hmm. And just, I moved to different countries every 2 to 5 years growing up. And so the external story changed. Mm-hmm. And then at some point, discovered the internal story changed as well. The story of what my father really was doing for a living changed, and so we will have things where we are operating along one story. We're in one script, so to speak. We think we're in a drama, and then suddenly it becomes a comedy. It becomes a romantic comedy. It becomes a tragedy. It becomes, so one of the things that I'm noticing as greater consciousness comes into form is that the story becomes, or the stories, whatever story, becomes less stable and predictable. And we get, crazy things. This has never happened before going on. So validation can be seen all around us of greater consciousness and form as the story becomes wilder and wackier.
Yeah. And, I think the challenge often is that there's so much unknown story in us, in each of us.
Right. We're running off narratives inherited from the past.
Right. That we're really not conscious of because we didn't ever have a place where we were encouraged to be curious, to be our own individual. I mean, so many of us come out of, you're my child and you are my carbon copy kind of thinking. And, that's very suppressing of that natural expression that's chose those parents in order to have its story, right? And, that child, that individual is going to have a different storyline than the one who's been allowed to question and do things and say no. And I think that's really what's showing up in a state of empowerment is our ability to say no and to mean it and have it have meaning. Because I don't think we're so trained often to when a child says no, we're told, well, no, I'm bigger than you and I know better and your no is really quite powerless to me. And you can see these different influences and different skill sets that we develop and different behaviors that come out of what's showing up. And that's what's exciting. That's why this time is exciting. And it might not always be pretty or graceful, right? Because suppressed energy is going to blow. It can get quite demonstrative. Right. And what we're looking for is how to let that valve off in a way that doesn't have to destroy things, even though destruction is okay, because like we were talking about before, there's no right or wrong with that. But most of us don't prefer violence. I don't think. Most people tend to prefer not to have to go to that place.
Yes, it seems to me that the old people who are in the old paradigm are creating change using old paradigm tools and techniques.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
and
definitely.
So they can't imagine not doing it with a certain amount of chaos and destruction. though it was interesting what you're saying, people, what I have noticed is that collectively people are speaking up about injustices, or they're no longer tolerating intolerable behavior. And that's for me, it's new to see that so collectively called out, that people are finding their voice and speaking out. And that's the reflection of what's really going on, which is the greater aspect of consciousness coming into form, everyone feeling more empowered, everyone feeling more collectively empowered. There's this great interdependentness, interconnectedness, and everyone, it's a sense of equality because we are all infinitely capable beings, just in different forms. We all have different stories about that.
Well, so for me, consciousness is a spectrum. So everything's there. And if I set in my judgment state, say, I'm right, you're wrong, then I'm not giving that other person who is as much consciousness as I am the respect that I want. So I'm finding what's really helpful this last couple of weeks is that our stories provide the distraction, the labels. They're wonderful. Oh boy, I can get into a tangent about this. I don't like this. I don't want that. Blah, 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 blah. Takes away from what's really truly there. Okay, here's something showing up. Now, I get to choose how I relate to the thing showing up. Now, in my world, I can appreciate it. I don't have to like it. And so how much value am I going to give to it is dependent on how I feel it is and relates to the whole spectrum. So, for instance, if I've judged something good or something bad, how important it plays within me is how much I'm willing to say, there's only bad, there's only good. Neither position really works for me. Okay, it might be different for someone else. So I can look at something that I've made a judgment about, and I can say, how much energy does this have in the whole? It just has that much. Well, let me put it into that context in my reality and see what happens. And when I do that, whatever seemed so big and in my face and blah, 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 all of a sudden starts to shrink. And I start to see it as part of the entirety. Part of the, how the part equals the whole? Well, I don't know. I never follow that one well. It just starts to shrink. And the influence and how I have to be with it and react takes that whole conversation of power and force and how all of it just starts to shift. Just starts to come down. And if we could do that, instead of demonizing something, and we can change that whole conversation, I think we're going to get through this really a lot easier.
Those people are not listening to this radio show.
Well, a 100th monkey principle. If all our listeners who are listening get just a little bit of it and start to let it radiate out in their field, it can make a difference, right?
That's so funny. I teach this little technique this little playful technique for stepping through doors to parallel universes. And that's the thing I wanted to touch base on too, is the qualities of consciousness are curious and playful. A lot of the words you've been using, Janet, it's curious and playful. It's lighthearted. It's open. Wonder. That was it. Mm-hmm. Consciousness approaches life with a sense of childlike wonder. So we do these little games of stepping into parallel universes, and they're just walking around the room, stepping through parallel universes, and then they leave the meetup, go home, and their entire life transforms. And I have been really tempted. I've been so tempted in the last couple of months. Let's just all line up and step collectively into a parallel universe where different things are happening. And, that I realize that's me wanting to change, fix, or manipulate outside the hologram, which is as useful as trying to move the set and furniture around on a stage.
Yeah, because each of those people has a different
right
expression of themselves. Yes.
And I have them not set firm agendas when they're walking around, because the mind that says that kind of agenda or that kind of intention is the mind that's coming from there's something wrong. And so what always happens when you do it that way is that you create a loophole, you create something wrong, even if you attain what you want. So the open-mindedness allows something to unfold that has not been considered before, that something, it unfolds bigger than you can imagine. So,
well, we can't imagine it.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
We can't imagine it. I mean, and if we just go back to the principles that we do know that are really basic, you have what is, oh gosh, that word keeps leaving me, which is really exciting.
We're both having these things.
Yeah, we're doing these things. We're losing these old, ways of looking at stuff. Yeah, the language is going. So what do you got before you got polarity? You got hot and cold, and what is that? Duality.
Duality. Yeah, dichotomy, duality.
Okay, I'm losing duality. Okay, because it's more about polarity, which is everything in between, but scalar is where you have something in matter and an antimatter, which is the exact opposite. So when you collapse the two of those together, something else happens that you can't predicate. You don't want to. You just want to know that it's no longer this and it's no longer this, and if those are no longer real, what is real? What is possible? And that's potential at play. And so if we start to think in these terms, basic energy principles, everybody, take what you think is getting your goat, and if you could let go of the framing you have, the judgment off of it, just enough to let this potential play what could happen. And this is using basic science. These are forces that play in the quantum world. And start to see what happens. We all need to do this.
Well, what you're talking about is similar to something I touched base on, which is doing things symbolically. And so there you haven't even placed the label on, this is my boss at work, or this is, the wrong stuff going on in the government or whatever. You aren't placing it on that. You are just noticing, what's out in front of you that feels dense, that feels uncomfortable, or what looks dark, what maybe looks like a tangled mess. And then you do something to that. You either step into the sunshine, you pull a string and watch it collapse and reform. I mean, when you're working playfully like that, that's when the miracles happen, because things unfold that you might never have thought of before. Got to write down a note. That was a new technique I just made up. Okay.
Okay, pull your string.
Pulling my string.
Great. Well, and I think that's, for me and my references. So if you have something that you're at issue with, remember that they probably have an issue with you. All right? Everybody's got a viewpoint here. If they're equal, what do we do with that? Okay? So that means you're extending respect and appreciation. And so that's what so many of us are complaining about, is that we're not getting heard. We're not getting respected.
We don't get no respect.
Exactly. So if you offer that, okay, and then what happens? Okay, how could this be different? It's not about convincing someone to your viewpoint. It's about allowing information to be without the judgments. And if you keep reframing this, then you get to the place of, well, what shows up? And this is where the beauty of life is, that you can do this.
Life is beautiful.
Life is beautiful. And and we're getting all these opportunities to challenge and practice, I mean, it's not a one-time deal here. It's like, oh, okay, we've been hit pretty hard here, repeatedly all day long for several days. Okay, what do I want to do with this? Did I fail? No, there's absolutely no failure in any of this. Do I need to kill someone? No, you don't need to go to that place. All you need to do is look at what is showing up. What do I feel about this? So that you get clear. You get clear on who you are and what's important to you. That's the empowerment that we're talking about. Yes. And then what do we do with it?
Yes. So we're leaving that question in the air. We're leaving you in this wonderful experience of heart space. We have to take a commercial break. You are listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. I'm your host, Joan, along here with Janet. Stay tuned. Right after these messages, we'll be talking more about power as consciousness.
Is your soul calling you to do something more meaningful with your life? Do you feel crazy for wanting to quit your secure job? Perhaps you are waiting until you retire to do what you love. Maybe you are too daunted to follow your dream. If any of these match your life, then Joan Newcomb's Purpose and Passion Coaching Program is just for you. In just 12 weeks, you will discover who you essentially are and why you are here. Learn to live as your greater self and navigate with conscious mastery. Go to joan-newcomb.com. That's joan-newcomb.com for all of her coaching programs. Would you like a fresh approach to the challenges you are dealing with? Take a journey into your enlightenment with Janet Barrett. Janet is a subtle energies empath, accessing the field of potential with warmth, humor, and support. She will help you to hear what your inner voice is saying. She will share with you how to appreciate who you are now and offer you new ways to understand and transform your issues. Reach her at www.janetandbeyond.com. That's janetandbeyond.com. Again, janetandbeyond.com. Transformation is possible. You can enjoy new outcomes in your current experiences. They can happen in the blink of an eye.
Welcome back. You're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. I'm your host, Joan. I'm along here with Janet, and we have been talking about power as consciousness.
We feel powerful.
We do.
Well, and I do think there's that shades of how men and
50
women.
shades of power.
Yeah, really? There you go.
And our power is wonderful, so that makes Janet and I Wonder Women.
Totally. I'm totally.
But with more modest modest covering, because some parts of my body have not seen the light of day since 1961.
I don't need people coming at me, None of that. But I think, in terms, because I do lead a men's group, and we have a wonderful time. We've been doing that for several years. I love being the only woman with a group of men. It really...
Story of my life, but yeah.
And when I mentioned power and force with them, they had a very different take on it than I did, which was interesting, and how they held it. And so I love all this exploration that we're doing because it challenges us to think outside of the box, which is the limit of how we are holding information. We're always going to have stories, everyone. There's nothing wrong with stories. The challenge is where our stories defines us in a way that we're not enjoying life.
Right.
And it's about enjoying life. I've been through enough experience. I've done other things. I'd rather enjoy my life. So,
it's kind of like, is the story expanding you? Is it serving you by with your expansion, or is it causing you stress? Is it upsetting you? So if you feel like if it's a limiting story, you can always turn that around.
And since whatever we are ripples out into the world, because that's the dynamic that happens, in me coming to a sense of enlivenment and enrichment. That plays out in my world. And as I serve as a focal point in consciousness, as we each do, you're reflecting to those around you how you hold yourself to be as consciousness. And the more that we are generating this connectiveness that says, I can love, and I can feel, and I can hate, and I can accept, and I can do all these things that we can be, and I am still okay, is empowering the whole field, is empowering all of us. And that's what's so beautiful about this. Every time one of us moves a little bit, everyone else gets that, catches that wave.
Yes, it's a ripple effect.
Totally.
We're all pebbles in a pond. Actually, we're not that dense, but you used to feel.
Sometimes it feels like it.
Yes. Well, some of the things we're emitting may be kind of dense.
Yeah.
Don't do that in the pond. Don't do that in the pool, please.
Well,
Tootsie roll in the pool.
More water because
Babe Ruth bar in the pool, right?
If your rock is too big, all the water splashes out, and then it evaporates and it goes somewhere else. It's not that in the pond is no water, right? If you splash all the water out of the pond, the water goes somewhere else. So it may change and transform and condense because it'll come back, but it won't be in that pond anymore. So
it becomes something different.
Something different.
Yes, that's what it's all about.
So what do we notice, Joan? This feels pretty perky, actually.
Unusually perky for the topic, I have to say.
Really? Yes, right? You don't have discussions about power and force and all that and feel perky afterwards. So that density that you were noticing in the beginning.
The disturbance in the force.
What is that feeling like now to you?
It feels more lighthearted. It feels like people, at least on the level of consciousness, they've gotten it. Mm. So they may not have completely reframed their story, but in floating down the river with you and I, you and me, floating down the river with me. They're floating down with you and me. We float down the river, grammatically correct or not. We're floating down the river and having this wonderful lovely experience as consciousness, and it has created an internal shift, which is what our intention is. Every time we do this show, we have helped change reality.
Well, you can get caught in the turbulence, right? Because there's always going to be turbulence.
Like
somewhere.
Water rafting.
Yes, right, exactly. But then there are the places where you get beyond and you go into some other place, and this feels like we had hit that turbulence, and now we're
in some other place.
Yeah, we're in some other place with it, which has got to be useful as far as I can tell. So, what else do we need to let people know before we go tonight?
We need to let them know how to go deeper with us beyond the show.
Right.
It's the website, Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet.com, and you can listen to our archived shows there, so you can listen to podcasts there. You can also read our blog posts, the wonderful wisdom that we put out. You can see my YouTube videos. I put out a Mystic Minute, which is usually several minutes, every week. And you can read about our meetups. You can find out how to attend our meetups in Portland, as well as Seattle, Bellevue, Tacoma, and University Place. You can learn about our sessions, Janet's sessions and my sessions. And you can also find us on Facebook. Joan Marjorie Newcomb on Facebook and Janet Barrett on Facebook, and Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet on Facebook. And we're also on Twitter, @Joan and Janet is our Twitter handle, and mine is @Joan M. Newcomb. And for people who are in the Seattle-Tacoma area, I am on Vashon Island this Saturday, the 11th of not September. What year are we in? February, the 11th of February. I'm doing a special talk. This is the year of realization, and what are you going to manifest? So you can take the ferry over and join us at 2 o'clock on the King County Library on Vashon. Or if you're hanging out in the Seattle area, I'm on Magnolia, I guess it is, at the Seattle Public Library in Magnolia, and I'm doing a Conscious Conversations meetup there. And as we're sliding into home, We're also doing our Conscious Conference call on Zoom. That's on Thursday the 16th. You can find out more on our website. And next week we are talking about sadness, grief, and sorrow as consciousness.
For Valentine's.
Yes, well, it's the day after. How important is it to acknowledge these feelings, and how can we possibly be happy in such wild and crazy times? So tune in next week to learn how, and we've got 30 seconds left, Janet.
Well, it's just always a delight to be with people and to feel the resonance is changing. Oh my goodness, this is so wonderful. Thank you all very much.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've been listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet, and I'm your host, Joan Newcomb.
And I'm Janet Barrett, and thank you so very much.
You've been listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. And thanks so much for helping to co-create the show, no matter if you're listening live or on demand. You energetically contribute to our collective experience. Joan and Janet love to hear from you and invite you to email your comments and ideas for them to explore each week. Contact them at consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Tune in next week for another great show, and until then, keep enjoying this wonderful adventure we call life.